her all semester, and she is so sweet and like takes care of her work, does everything she's supposed to do. But every once in a while, people just have had enough, right? So let's say that this afternoon, Gina's walked over to Walgreens, she's going to get herself a little snack, and she says, "You know what? I'm tired of playing by the rules." And so she reaches over there and she grabs herself a king-size Snickers and throws it in her bag. Living on the edge. Look, she's like mortified already. She's like, "Don't tell my parents." Okay, so she steals a Snickers. Well, it just so happens that at that time, one of the Walgreens employees sees her. And so they yell. They're like, "Hey, I saw you do that." And so then Gina reaches into her backpack and pulls out her gun. And she says to the cashier, "If you're going to go, you're going to go." Okay? So she points her gun at the cashier and she says, "Give me all your money." And so the cashier gives her about, let's say, like $400. And so then Gina walks out of the parking lot and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't have my car here. Like I just walked over." Well, so she looks out there in the parking lot and she happens to see Jacob just sitting there in his car. So she jumps into the passenger side. He's not really thinking anything of it. He's like, "Hey, Gina," and she points her gun at him and she says, "Drive." Okay. So now they head to Oklahoma. And they get over the border and they stop and get gas, and Jacob kind of gets away and calls the police and everything. And so the police apprehend Gina, and now we've got a situation, obviously, right? Okay.
They can still pull her back, can't they?
Huh?
They can still make her come back to Texas.
They can make her come back to Texas. Why? What do we call that?
Extradition.
It is extradition. What part of the Constitution provided for that? Article 4. Good job. Okay. So, that's right. So Gina's now going to come back to Texas, and now we have a situation, you guys, where she has potentially committed several crimes. We don't have a conviction. We don't know, but the government is going to want to prosecute her for those. So the stealing a candy bar, that is a crime against the city of Frisco. The robbing an employee at gunpoint, that's a crime against the state of Texas, right? And then the kidnapping, that's a crime against the United States government, okay? So let's say that the state of Texas has the strongest case, right? Like they have the most evidence, and they're like, "We really want to make an example," and so we're going to. They kind of all just decide who's going to go first, and Texas is going to go first, okay? So that case is going to be written out, you guys. It's going to be Texas versus Gina, okay? Like it's the person. It's like the prosecution versus the person that's being accused the first time, okay? So Gina's going to go to trial. We know that Gina has a right to an attorney, right? Like the Sixth Amendment says that. But Gina's parents are mortified, and they're like, "We cannot believe you have done this to us. So we refuse to pay for your attorney. You're done." And they walk away. Well, the Sixth Amendment guarantees you an attorney, and we believe in this country that the government should pay for it. So she will be provided a court-appointed attorney. Your attorney is terrible, by the way. Forgets to show up, falls asleep during court, does a really bad job. And Gina's super quickly convicted. So she's convicted, and let's say that you get 5 years in jail. So she's sitting there in jail. She's like, I wish I hadn't done that. I made some mistakes. But you know what? I remember AP government. And I remember some of the things Ms. Rosenfeld said. And while I did technically violate the law, I don't think my rights were protected. I think that them giving me an attorney who forgot to show up and fell asleep and didn't properly advocate for me, I think my Sixth Amendment rights were violated. So she decides that she is going to file an appeal. An appeal is just going to follow the arrows, you guys. So again, it would just be whoever has jurisdiction. So she files an appeal with the State Court of Appeals. Now it becomes Gina versus Texas, because it's loser versus winner. So it's whoever's asking for something different than what had happened before. When you file an appeal, you no longer have a jury. You're not looking at guilt or innocence. What you're looking at is, did we follow the law? Did we do what was fair? Did the action of the officials match with the Constitution? Does the law match with the Constitution? You're going to have potentially a panel of judges. You could have as many as 5. To be honest, they're overworked though. So in most cases, it's just going to be a couple. So you're going to have a panel of judges, and they have a couple things they could do. Okay. So at the State Court of Appeals, let's say that the judges think, you know what, we don't really think your rights were violated. Yes, technically you got a bad attorney, but so what? The Sixth Amendment doesn't say you should get a good attorney. So they could uphold the conviction, and then it's done. Okay? They could say to her, you know what, your rights were so gravely violated, we're going to send this back down to the state district court, and we're going to try you again, but we're going to make sure you get a qualified attorney this time, and so that your rights are preserved. Or they could say, Gina, your rights were so gravely violated, we don't ever want this to happen again. We are going to set you free.
What?
Okay?
They can do that?
Sure. Okay, so any of those things could happen. Okay?
Wait. What if like it was something like more major, like she like murdered someone or something? Could they do the same thing like murder?
The conviction can't stand. If the court says that the conviction was wrongfully obtained, they can do what they want. Absolutely.
Tragic.
Okay? All right, let's go with the last one. Let's go with, Gina, your rights were so gravely violated, we set you free. Okay? Who is not going to like that decision? The state of Texas, right, Jacob? All right, she's coming after me. All right, Jacob's not going to like, or the state of Texas isn't going to like that because, you guys, that has now established what's called a precedent. That says to the state of Texas, when we provide court-appointed attorneys, not only do we have to appoint attorneys, but now they have to be qualified. They have to show up. They've got to whatever, and it's opened up like the burden on them. So they're probably going to appeal because they're concerned about the consequences to them. So they would appeal in this country or in this state to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals because that handles criminal law. How is it going to be written now? Texas versus Gina because they are the ones that are asking for the appeal. Okay? Good? Okay. Over here, the Supreme Court does have jurisdiction over state law. So let's say that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals decides they're going to uphold what the state Court of Appeals did. Texas could still appeal to the Supreme Court. Here's the difference. The Supreme Court does not have to hear your case. The nickname for the Supreme Court is the court of last resort. They're the final word on the Constitution. They hear less than 1% of the requests for appeals that are asked of them. So there's got to be like a very, very specific reason, and we're going to get to that later today, like what would cause them to do that. Okay? All right, so let's say that happens, though. Okay, let's say that it's all that, and Gina's free. Okay? Is she done? Is this whole instance done?
No.
Why?
Like I said, that they can try to convict her of it again.
They can't try her for the robbery again because that one's now done.
What about the gun?
Very good. What about what they can do is they can look, okay, what are the other things she did? So what else did she do?
She pointed the gun at him.
No kidding. Poor Jacob, she kidnapped him. Okay? So now the U.S. District Court does have a right to try her as well. And honestly, those things could even go on simultaneously, just depending on how they can work it out in logistics. So you guys remember in U.S. history, you may have learned about that bombing that happened in Oklahoma City like years ago. Okay, so those guys, they broke federal crime and state crimes because it was a federal building, but it was also murder in Oklahoma City. So the one guy, Terry Nichols, like he was first tried by the federal government, and he didn't get the death penalty from them. So then the state of Oklahoma also tried him because the reason was they wanted to make sure if anything ever happened or he ever got out, that then he would also then have to go to the other jail. That's not a violation of double jeopardy because it's a different crime. Okay? You can't just turn around and try somebody for the exact same instance, the exact same crime. Okay? Thank you for being a good sport. We know you would never do any of those things. Okay? All right. Okay. Here's what I need you to do. Flip your paper to the back of the first page, and we are going to look at question number 1. Question 1 says, how do federalism and jurisdiction affect the influence that the court might have on public policy? You want to spend some time kind of talking about that with your partners and come up with an answer? Okay, why don't you do that, and then we'll go over them.